Yo, what's going on, CZN fam? I'm Sue, and welcome back to another how to play video for Chaos Zero Nightmare. This one will be on Chizuru. As with all my guides, I'll give you a basic overview of the character before we break down the best epiphanies, memory fragments, combatants, and partner choices for the character. Without any further ado, let's get right into the guide. Chizuru is a combatant of the Striker class that specializes in multi-hit, single-target attacks. While Chizuru can generate a lot of damage and value for your team, she has a few mechanics that can be kind of confusing at first. Keywords such as Will-O-Wisp, Inhibit, Bind, and Curse Shackles can feel very overwhelming at first glance, and not understanding them will cause the character to feel pretty underwhelming. Don't worry though, this is a how to play guide after all, so I'll try to make it as simple as possible for you when we go over the character cards in just a moment. If I had to summarize this character's 3 keys to success, it would look something like this. And don't worry if you don't understand all 3 points, there will be a recap later. Number 1, determine which version, if any, of Bound at Dusk is necessary for our game plan. Number 2, find a way to build Will-O-Wisp to fuel Chizuru's offense. And 3, play Shadow of the Moon at the right time for maximum damage. Now, let's go over Chizuru's unique cards so you can get a feel for her core gameplay loop. First, Karmic Flames. It's a single target attack that starts in your hand every battle. Using Karmic Flames on an enemy will inflict them with Curse Shackles. Shackles is a unique debuff that can only be inflicted on one enemy at a time. Whenever an enemy with Shackles is attacked, Chizuru will gain 1 stack of Will-O-Wisp, as indicated here underneath your life bar. Once you have 5 Will-O-Wisps, the gauge will be set back to 0, and you will receive 1 copy of Shadow of the Moon in your hand. Shadow of the Moon is Chizuru's ultimate card, and the only card currently as of the recording of this video with the Bind keyword. Whenever you read Bind for effects, just assume it means Shadow of the Moon. If you ever have duplicate copies of Shadow in your hand, they merge into 1 card and increase their Bind stack count. Each Bind stack increases the amount of hits the move has, drastically increasing its offensive power. Shadow of the Moon starts at Bind 1, and when it reaches Bind 3 or more, it upgrades into Shadow of the Moon Plus. This version of the attack comes with a special animation and also heals your team by 5% of their maximum HP. All versions of Shadow of the Moon have retained, so don't worry about losing them between turns. Tabling back to Karmic Flames now, you can simply just think of this as one way to gain Will-O-Wisp. Most variations of this move also feature an additional effect if you attack an enemy again with Karmic Flames once they're already cursed. You'll maybe get, say, an additional hit or some bonus damage. This is just in case you want to replicate this card in order to go for specific combos. If the enemy with Shackles dies, you will have to replay Karmic Flames again to apply it to start gaining Will-O-Wisp stacks. It's for this reason that you shouldn't really view Karmic Flames as the only way to build stacks. I find most players that I talk to feel like Karmic Flames is the core of Chizuru's offense, when in reality it's just a small part of it. If you have other cards that can build up Will-O-Wisp stacks, this is just going to basically be another attack that isn't really that special. Think of Shackles as a bonus, not a core part of the game plan, and I think you'll find more success with the character. If there is a card though that I feel like is core to Chizuru's game plan, it's probably the next one, Tsukiyomi. The base version of the card generates 2 Will-O-Wisps for each hit of the next attack card that Chizuru plays. Considering many of Chizuru's attacks could hit anywhere from 2 to 5 times, playing this at the right moment is the most consistent way to build up your stacks. Many of the card's Epiphany Choices define your playstyles with Chizuru, and a lot of the Divine Epiphany Choices can also grant you things like draw power or morale, which are incredibly important. Next, we come to perhaps the most controversial card in Chizuru's kit, which is Bound at Dusk. At the start of your turn, you gain the Inhibit status, which is a debuff that states that you can only gain AP when you start your turn or whenever you ravage an opponent. In exchange, your Shadow of the Moon gains an additional hit, and you're also given some kind of bonus passive such as card cost reduction or being able to play certain cards for free each turn. This card is very much a double-edged sword. If you build around it properly, it can be a huge boon for your team. But if you don't, well, it can very easily backfire and actually harm your team's overall performance. For example, the Inhibit debuff makes it so that a character like Mika isn't particularly very good. If you actually wanted to use Mika with Chizuru, well then you'd probably be better off removing Bound at Dusk from your deck. Conversely, if you play Chizuru along a hero like, say, Magna that has many expensive lead cost abilities, well then there are Epiphany choices that you could take that make that combination far more valuable for you. We'll talk more about Bound at Dusk later in the Epiphany section, so that way you can get a feel for the best usage of each version of this move. Lastly, we come to Oni Hunt. It's a 3-hit attack that increases the damage of each hit of your Shadow of the Moon by 30%. Oni Hunt is a pivotal role player on this character, serving as your primary damage source for a lot of builds, but it can also be a key utility piece in others. Before the recap, we have to talk about Chizuru's ego skill, Moonlight High Tide. It's a single target attack that deals 250% damage, plus an additional 50% for each Shadow of the Moon that you've created this fight, up to a maximum of 10. For 5 ego points, this is actually a pretty solid move. If you're executing your game plan well, it's a great nuke to finish off a particular fight, but if you're struggling to find your footing, it's going to end up feeling lackluster, as 5 ego points for 250% damage isn't really worth it. To recap how to play the character, Step 1, decide if you're going to use Bound at Dusk. Step 2, use Karmic Flames, Tsukuyomi, and Oni Hunt to build Will-O-Wisp stacks. And Step 3, once you have enough Shadow of the Moons in your hand, unleash hell. Let's move on to Epiphany Choices, starting with Karmic Flames. Option 1, like most, is just a stronger version of the base effect. Option 2 changes the bonus from attacking an enemy that already has shackles to decreasing Chizuru's next card by 1. And Option 3 has a higher base damage than the other two and increases the damage of attacking an enemy that already has shackles. The problem with all three of these, though, is that they're only good in multiples, meaning that option number 3 most of the time is going to be the best, at least out of these ones. Option 4 turns Karmic Flames into a skill that still applies shackles on the target, but also puts a Shadow of the Moon in your hand. And finally, Option 5 is another skill-based upgrade that marks a target for shackles and then returns it to your hand when the shackles target is defeated. For most players, Option 5 will be your best option, as it effectively gives you 100% uptime on shackles, always being in your hand when you need it. For those whales out there, though, you may want to consider option number 4. At Manifest Ego level 2, Chizuru gets back a Shadow of the Moon every time she uses Shadow of the Moon Plus. When combined with AP generation or cost reduction effects, it is possible to get a Karmic Flame that refunds you a good chunk of every Shadow of the Moon Plus that you use, and then spam them repeatedly. Next up, Tsukuyomi. Option number 1 is again an enhanced version of the base skill, giving you 3 Will-O-Wisps per hit instead of 2. Option number 2 gives you an additional hit to Chizuru's attacks, but does reduce the Will-O-Wisps gained. Option number 3 adds 2 hits to your next Shadow of the Moon or Shadow of the Moon Plus that you use, even if it currently isn't in your hand. If you could duplicate this one, it's very powerful. You could slowly build up a Shadow of the Moon over time that could generate an obscene amount of hits, possibly even infinite damage if you can stall that long. Option number 4 generates 3 Will-O-Wisps for each of Chizuru's attack cards in your hand, which in multiples can generate a boatload of Shadow of the Moons in a hurry. Option number 5 is an upgrade that gives you 2 Will-O-Wisps whenever Chizuru uses an attack. I find that option number 3 is usually the strongest option for most builds for this character, but number 1 and number 5 can also be very consistent. The most important set of epiphanies, though, comes from our next card, Bound at Dusk. Remember, if you can't really take advantage of any of these bonuses in your build, it might be worth getting rid of the card. Option number 1 reduces 2 random cards in your hand by 1 cost, effectively giving you 2 extra AP a turn, assuming that every card in your hand is actually worth playing. Option number 2 reduces the cost of your next card by 1 when using Shadow of the Moon Plus, which only really feels worth it if you're at Ego level 2 or higher to use the free Shadow of the Moon that it generates. Option number 3 activates 2 random cards in your hand from your teammates at the start of the turn. If your deck is set up in such a way that your teammates are already 2 supporters with a bunch of draw effects or buffs that you're going to play anyway, then this could be fantastic. Option number 4 activates 2 random lead cards in your hand at the start of every turn, which is great if you plan to play her with combatants like Magna or are trying to build around cards like Forbidden Algorithm. And finally, option number 5 reduces the highest cost card in your hand by 2. This one is particularly powerful with copies of the 2 cost Karmic Flames in your deck. It will allow you to effectively pick up a free Shadow of the Moon every turn, assuming that you have multiples of it. Most of the time, options 1 and 5 are going to be your safe bets. Options 2, 3, and 4 are specialized, and you should avoid them unless you have a dedicated build in mind. The last set of epiphanies to talk about is for Oni Hunt. Option number 1 reduces the damage it deals, but increases the hit count, making it incredible for dealing tons of damage if you play a damage buffer like Rei. Option number 2 turns this move into a single target hit, but gives a big damage boost to your Shadow of the Moon Plus whenever you finally play it. Option number 3 has the potential for the most damage, but only if it's the last attack card in your hand. This one, I'm not really a fan of because you usually will have a Shadow of the Moon sitting somewhere in your hand, which makes it difficult to take advantage of. Option number 4 creates 2 copies of Chizuru's multi-hit basic attack in your hand and changes their cost to 0. This is very similar to Mei Lin's Unity of Attack and Defense. If you get a Divine Epiphany version of this card to make it cost 0 AP, or draw a card and replicate it several times, you can kind of build a deck that generates quite a lot of damage very quickly and build up a Shadow of the Moon very, very fast. Lastly, we come to option number 5, which gives plus 40% damage to your Shadow of the Moon plus hits, and also passively generates through Will-O-Wisp every single turn. This one's a solid option for players who want something that's very consistent and don't necessarily want to have to worry about having the correct cards in their hand every turn to combo out. To recap, options number 1 and 5 are generically good in most builds, with option number 4 being a combo player's dream. Numbers 2 and 3 aren't necessarily bad, but I do find them to be a bit too situational for most builds. Moving on to memory fragments, these for Chizuru are pretty simple. You would think that the Orb of Inhibition set would be her best since it's the one that came out with her and also boosts multi-hit attacks, but doing some of the number crunching myself as well as double checking with others, it's not actually worth it. If this changes, look for a pinned comment down below. As of the recording of this video though, she has 2 good setups. The first is a 2-piece Blackwing set, 2-piece Executioner's Tool set, and then a 2-piece set of your choice. Usually either Cursed Corpse for the Agony multiplier if you need it, or Sescarab for the bonus damage to her basic attacks. The second setup is a 4-piece Conqueror's Aspect set with 2-piece Executioner's Tool set. Since Shadow of the Moon and Oni Hunt are your primary DPS tools and they cost 1, this is going to give you a huge boost to your damage. Do keep in mind that if you have Epiphany Choices that reduce the cost of your cards to say 0 and not 1, you will lose a lot of damage with this setup. For substats, flat attack, attack percentage, crit chance, and crit damage percentage are the stats that you should be chasing. For your right side main pieces, you'll want crit chance percentage in the 4th slot, void damage percentage in the 5th slot, and attack percentage in the 6th slot. As for partners, this one's pretty simple. Zetera is your best free-to-play option as she gives you a multiplicative damage amp that's very competitive if you have her at Ego level 5. It's going to outdamage almost all other options aside from the 5-star partner Itsuku, and even then it's kind of a toss-up. What gives Itsuku the slight edge is the 4-cost Ego skill, as it adds quite a lot of damage to your multi-hit moves for the turn. This is great if you want to pop off and have those huge combo turns, but if you're not really trying to do that, you're not that kind of player, then her performance is kind of like at or slightly below Zetera's. It would only really pull for this partner if you really love Chizuru or you think that it might get a buff sometime in the near future, as the devs have been hinting at. As always, check down below for a pinned comment to see if anything has changed since this guide was released. Finally, we come to combatants. It's no secret that the developers have been pushing really hard for Rei to be the support of choice for Chizuru players. Rei offers you not only incidental healing with her Ego Skill 2 upgrade, but also a boatload of buffs to your damage. Rei's boosts primarily benefit characters that are multi-hit, of the Void attribute, and might also use a lot of basic attacks. Chizuru basically checks all of these boxes. Doubly so if you're focused on builds like the Oni Hunt one that generates lots of basic attacks every single turn for free. If you don't like Rei, Cassius is another fine alternative for the healer slot. When played right, his myriad of card draw effects and searches can easily keep your team topped off and provide you with the specific cards you need to get your offense going. Veronica is another character that I want to highlight here that works well with Chizuru. Although, to be fair, Veronica kind of works with everyone. Her ability to passively deal damage while also drawing boatloads of cards and generating shields is simply too good to pass up, I feel like, most of the time. A lack of shields, I find, is usually what ends up being the thing that ruins runs with Chizuru, and both Cassius and Veronica can be built in ways that can circumvent that. That said, if you want a tried and true tank, I feel like Maribel and Magda actually have performed solidly enough for me, albeit they're not as good as Veronica, Cassius, or Rei. Still, if you need a tank, they can work just fine. And that's going to do it for how to play Chizuru. If I missed anything, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. And if you want to see more how to play guides in the same style, there should be a playlist on your screen now. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me over on Patreon, linked in the video's description. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.